1938 was a big year for human advancement. Nuclear fusion was discovered, opening up a new frontier for science and medicine. Snow White was just released as the first completely animated full-length feature film. And Dutch historian Johan Huizinga published a book called Homo Ludens, a book whose significance in video game history and video game development wouldn't be fully utilized till decades later. Homo Ludens meaning man play or man the player. Despite being written decades before video games were even thought to be a possibility, this mostly philosophical book ended up being a crucial building block to game designers because of one key concept: the magic circle. The magic circle is the idea that when you play, you sort of leave reality and enter a new one where special rules apply. And when in this circle, you're not just following rules, you're interpolating them, immersing yourself within the magic circle as if it were real. Within these special rules, separate from reality, your hands cannot touch the ball, you can only use your feet to move the ball, and white lines become boundaries you cannot let the ball cross. When in play, these rules become common sense, and as you're immersed in the game, you take these rules seriously. Almost as if you forget you actually have the physical capabilities to touch the ball with your hands, which may sound like an exaggeration, but it really isn't when you think about it. A football player isn't constantly thinking of picking up the ball when in play, even if it would seem like the most obvious thing to do under normal circumstance. Even if the ball is about to hit the football player in the face, he will not think to use his hands. Instead, he will use his chest or lean into it with his head, redirecting it. Their minds tend to focus on how they could score a goal or win the game, whilst completely thinking within the box of the rules. It never comes across a soccer player's mind the thought of picking up the ball with his hands and full sprinting it towards the goals. Now, to fully understand this concept, we must peel back the layers and understand that, like the football player, we ourselves are thinking within the box of the rules put on us. Because this magic circle isn't just exclusive to sports and games. Huizinga argues that within our daily lives we are governed by rules, some obvious, for example, the laws of the country we live in, whilst others are unwritten and changing depending on who you are, who you're with, and when. You act differently with your friends than you do around your parents, your teachers to your peers. This may seem like common sense, but in doing this, you're constantly entering and leaving different magic circles that contain different rules, social dynamics, and stakes constantly in your daily life. When we go to school, we enter the magic circle where we play as a student and the other plays as a teacher, and we have unwritten rules to follow that if we breaks the illusion of the magic circle. If students decide not to play their part and don't show up to class, it would be as if the football player picked up the ball with his hands, and then, in so doing, the teacher will not be able to play his part. And if the teacher doesn't afford a commanding and competent presence to the student and starts acting erratically, and doesn't act at all what a student in his mind understands to be a teacher, the student will be unable to play his role too, and will not be able to take the teacher seriously. You can think of the magic circle as culture, and the rules as cultural norms, as Huizinga draws parallels between the two and says the two are tied together. All are temporary worlds within the ordinary world, dedicated to the performance of an act apart. The reason why I find it so hard to notice how constructed and governed we are by rules can be summarized nicely by a quote by Marshall McLuhan. "I don't know who discovered water, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't a fish." We represent the fish in this quote, and the water represents our constructed reality, the big magic circle we currently live in. The fish doesn't realize he's in the water because that's all he knows. To him, that's just the way things work. It takes an observer, someone outside of the water, to realize what the water is and if they are in it or not. A fish who has never been outside of the water is not going to notice floating and swimming as water-specific things. Just like how we don't realize all the social etiquette and group-specific behaviors we do are constructed and taught. That language is taught, and depending on what language we are taught will change the way we think and view the world. We think we have freedom, but we are trapped in the rules of the ideas that were taught to us. And once we learn a language, we are trapped into thinking and relating to the world in that language. Language like I, you, he, she gives us a perception of the world as singular beings that a baby would not have. The baby would have a totally different view and interaction of the world than you and I would have, likely viewing the outside world and the internal world as one of the same. All play moves and has its being within a playground marked off beforehand, either materially or ideally, deliberately or as a matter of course. Just as there is no formal difference between play and ritual, so the consecrated spot cannot be formally distinguished from the playground. He and others also claim that this phenomenon isn't exclusive to just humans, and in fact it seems to be present all across nature. Dogs naturally play fight and enter a magic circle with each other without even knowing they're doing it. Not only does the playful nip denote what would be denoted by the bite for which it stands, but in addition the bite itself is fictional. To translate this strangely worded sentence, it means that when dogs play, they will bite each other, bark at each other, and even show signs of anger. But they are not really mad. They're not really biting each other with the intent to harm. They are pretending. They are playing. And like these dogs, humans also get angry during play. They might yell in frustration or be angry with the other person. But like dogs, this isn't real anger. They aren't literally angry at the other person. They are just encapsulated in the magic circle and playing along with the dynamic. And once the game is over, they'll go back to friends again. This behavior can cause people from the outside to intrude on the magic circle and break the fragile illusion of the magic circle. This is what Huizinga refers to as spoil sports. You shouldn't get so worked up over a game. And the reason that phrase is so annoying is because what they don't understand is that this is where a lot of the fun from the game actually comes from. The play, the expression of emotions within the magic circle that aren't real but aren't fake either. They exist within that bubble, and we can allow conflict, stress and fear to express themselves in a safe environment. And when someone is getting worked up over a game, it just means they are immersed within the magic circle. For play to exhibit emotion from the player must first be invested. So what are some techniques that are used by game designers to allow their players to be invested in the game so they can enter the magic circle? Each game genre, type of game, and individual game itself creates a different magic circle for gamers to enter. Some singular games create multiple communities and magic circles. For example, Halo creates a magic circle for the campaign where you play as a powerful soldier killing aliens by yourself or with a friend. It creates a magic circle for its online community where people are competitive and try to find the best strategies and builds to win games. And it also creates a magic circle that combines both the competitive nature of online and the single player campaign with speedrunning communities which are relevant and popular even today, decades after the original Halo came out. The magic circles aren't just created by the developers, but also the players who create culture around these games and form communities amongst themselves. In the game Kingdom Come, you enter a magic circle where you are a farmer who is slowly becoming a knight in a medieval world. Now this situation is likely quite far from your actual reality, yet the game draws you into the magic circle and immerses you to a point where you understand what's going on in this world, and it feels like you're in a real place with real characters and real events happening, even though in reality you're just looking at pixels on a screen while holding a handful of buttons. But it feels real, and if it didn't feel real, you wouldn't be playing it. So how does it accomplish this? First off, it accomplishes this by creating a physical space and setting for you to explore and reside in. This place is designed carefully by the developers to be consistent and believable. If it wasn't, it would be jarring and unenjoyable. Imagine if you went inside a castle, and then someone shoots you with an AK-47, and instead of dying, you got teleported to a random place under the ocean, and Aquaman was there. Despite possibly sounding interesting as I explain it, this would not create a very enjoyable playing experience, because there's too much variance and no consistency. It doesn't allow the player to sink themselves into the magic circle and actually believe it's a real place, because spatially, thematically, and chronologically, it makes no sense. If it were designed like this, it would not have one game of the year, I'll tell you that much. Instead, the game does this research and makes sure every location is consistent, and actually uses real-world examples in order to build its world. Graphically, this game mimics the real world. It uses realistic lighting, shadows, fog, and a game engine that mimics gravity in the game world, on its items and people. Sound design that mimics real life. Like, look how the horse's footsteps sound different on different surfaces. Such a small detail, but it's fantastic. When done well, this allows the player to make a lot of automatic assumptions about the game world. Since it looks similar, sounds similar, and feels similar to real life, the player expects it to act similar to real life as well, and can already predict that if they jump off a cliff, they'll probably die. So using this art style of photorealism can really help draw the players into the magic circle, because they already have some familiarity. And the game also has consistency within the world. In this game, you are a human, with human-like abilities. You'll die if you take a human amount of damage. And all this seems obvious and taken for granted, but if you had seemingly random and inconsistent powers and abilities, it would break the immersion. I say seemingly because realism isn't actually important, it's more the illusion of realism. In Call of Duty you play as a human, but you can get shot and heal within seconds. Not very human-like, but you die in a few bullets, so it still casts the illusion of human. A game where this actually presents a bit of a problem is The Witcher 3, where you play as a superhuman mutant who is so much stronger and faster and... What? You die from a 1 meter fall? I wouldn't even die from that fall. What? Things like this aren't game breaking, but it can take you out of the experience, so it's best to keep consistency. The Witcher should be able to fall from much higher than this. Real life games and sports don't really need to worry about this too much, because they're already taken care of by nature. You have automatic graphics in the way you interpret the world and understand it, and there's already consistency. A football player won't randomly jump 100 feet in the air because the laws of nature makes that physically impossible. But for a video game, this has to be considered because you can jump 100 feet in the air in a football game if it's not programmed correctly. Next, you need rules. The rules, the aim or objective of the game. Even if it's an RPG where you can do anything you want, there needs to be some sort of direction for the player to take. This allows the player to create their own way of achieving it given the rules. RPGs will usually do this by having a plot, or a campaign, or some goal the character wants to reach at the end, or even the way the world is designed. Making enemies in a certain area unbeatable until your character is stronger might give the player some internal narrative to want to get stronger. But if you just plop a player in the middle of the world with no rules, no direction, no levels to obtain, nothing to gain, they will not be able to gain interest in the game and enter the magic circle, because to create the magic circle you need the rules for the player to interact with. And by rules we mean it in a general definition. Take back all the assumptions you already have. Rules are very broad. Remember, real life follows rules. In the magic circle of society, we all agree as a rule that we can exchange pictured paper that we call money for objects of actual value. This is a rule, but it does not tell the player what to do. This rule may make the player want to earn more money, may make the player want to save money and spend it on something they deem valuable, or may make the player want to use the money to make more money. The rules don't always tell you how you should play, but gives you boundaries and limitations that allow the player to decide for themselves how they want to play. So all things in an RPG taken for granted, gold, levels, quests and items, are all rules by the game, and without these rules, there is no game. Video game design is a very complicated and multi-layer practice, but Huizinga's magic circle allows us to understand what encapsulates humans to get invested and enter a flow state in an experience, and gives us a general and strong foundation on how to mimic and create an experience digitally. There is so much more to what goes into designing video games, but it's interesting to see how something written decades before video games could help so much in designing them. Thank you for watching.